Welcome to the Delta F1 podcast, your pit stop to all things F1 and more. Today is Monday, and following the Japanese Grand Prix, and now that we've had a little bit of time to sit and digest it, we have met together now to discuss the highs, the lows, the drama, the action, the lack of action of the Japanese Grand Prix. So, yeah, I figured we'd at least get started with what our initial race predictions were compared to what actually happened. Um, and yeah, we were both right on the winner, but the
Surprisingly.
I think the rest of the grid or the rest of the order, we were wrong. We were off.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising to see the results. I think overall, just the first two, Checo and Max is running away with it, but
Mm-hmm.
behind them too, it was pretty entertaining to watch it. And did you see down all the grid? It was very interesting to see how a lot of the drivers, a lot of the teams were in such different tire strategies and everything like that. So it was just kind of
Yeah.
a unique dynamic added to the Japanese Grand Prix. I know it's kind of hard to pass, so it wasn't super eventful in that aspect, but the cars are bigger. It's a little bit more difficult in that topic. But I think overall, it was a clean race. Besides the red flag in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
the weather was great. No rain, no delays or anything
Yeah.
like that. But ultimately, the champion and soon to be four-time champion Max Verstappen won again.
Yeah, no, he took another win, a pretty dominant win, winning by I think like 12 seconds
Yep.
over Sergio Perez. But Perez still, I mean, did a great job to be close to him. I mean, if you take 12 seconds over the course of like 50 laps, right? I mean, it's a pretty small margin to be down um, in reality. And yeah, the like differing strategies was super interesting to have that red flag happen immediately, and then starting the race on lap three. It really threw a spanner in the works, and
Right.
everyone went different. Like I really thought Mercedes had a great strategy call going on to the hards,
Mm-hmm.
to do like a hard, but even they seem to struggle. I mean, Hamilton in particular seemed to be struggling even after the race, saying that he was just struggling with understeer
I
compared to
think
George
he's
and volunteering to let George by.
yeah. Like I said, it was very early on, so I was very surprising to see that he was voluntarily. I was like, should I let George pass? And I'm like, that's not really typical of Lewis Hamilton. So, but it was something to do with his damage that he sustained early on in the race with Charles, right? Because I think his front right, like one of his sensors was messing up with his touch up with Charles. So I think that ultimately early on in the race, I think it just messed up with his mindset, maybe affected the car pretty much, and ended up not really being super competitive. He came away what, ninth?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, came away ninth.
kind of a downer,
Mm-hmm.
especially because they were pretty competitive in all three practice sessions, right? Like they were pretty, close up to middle of the pack, top five and whatnot. They were doing pretty good, and I think both George and Lewis were, spoke highly of the car, and there just was not a good qualifying session and
Mm-hmm.
race. I think George after the race said that it's important to, especially when that, after Red Bull, the following teams, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Mercedes, it's important with qualifying, especially in this track, where it's a little bit more difficult to pass, to
Yeah,
qualify ahead of those, because ultimately that'll lead to a better result. But it's kind
yeah,
of
of
unfortunate.
course.
You see Fernando's comment
No, what did he
about
say?
they asked him about the potential rumors with Mercedes and whatnot, and he said something along the lines like, "Well, Mercedes is behind us, so it's not too attractive." So it's just, I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know. And then ultimately, think about it. Remember early on in the week, it was reported that Toto Wolff was scheduled to miss the race, and he ended up actually showing up. Come to
yeah.
look at it, I'm sure he probably regrets it a little bit showing up to that race.
Yeah, well, maybe he doesn't regret it as bad as James Vows does, though. Another
Oh yeah,
tough weekend for Williams. And now we've had three crashes over the courses of two races, and another chassis probably having to be sent back to. It was almost two, but
yeah.
another chassis having to be sent back to England to get sent back to China before we have the race there.
Did you
So
see the tweet? There was a tweet that was, I don't know who made it, some reporter, but it was when the red flag happened.
mhm.
And it said something like, if I was Logan Sargent, I wouldn't get out of the car seat or something like that. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what if that was so funny.
That's actually really good. Yeah, don't get out of the car. They'll just give it to Albon.
Yeah, just stay there. Just don't get out. Just play it safe. But I think ultimately the way the angle of his crash, Albon, into the wall, I think he said after the Porsche race that I think he might have affected the chassis a little bit in the front right, which is just unfortunate, especially because they don't have the spare chassis until Miami, right? So you have to wait.
And it could
race.
get delayed further now, with that, right? So could delay it even further. They were supposed to have it for Australia. They didn't. They were supposed to have it for then Miami. Now they might not. We'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, even Albon admitted while he was going towards the wall, he was just thinking, wow, the team does not need this. And I can't even imagine that being in that kind of situation where that's the first thing you think about when you're piling at a wall at about 120, 130 miles an hour to be like, oh, wow, the team really did not need this. I think that just goes to show that the team's just in a really, really rough spot. And
that's affecting their whole thing. I mean, their upgrades are going to be delayed because of this. They're going to be focused on fixing the cars. They're going to be delaying
and the cost. I mean, between these 2 weekends, I saw an estimate of $2 to $3 million in a budget cap era like that. That is that's really tough. A lot of teams put money aside for crashes, but to take $3 million of damage this early in the season and 2 weekends in a row, I think is going to be terrible.
Yeah, and then Logan, that wasn't a good start. Didn't FP1, he freaking biffed it and spun around?
He did, yeah. Yeah, so really what we've actually had 4 crashes then in the course of, because you had, 3. It's 3 crashes.
No, I think it was 3.
Yeah, because the crash in Australia. Yeah, the crash in Australia, and then FP1, and the crash in the race. But then,
it's super unfortunate.
Again, Logan almost made it 4. And I actually, hats off to Logan. I don't think I've, at least in recent years, ever seen someone be able to get a car through a gravel trap in reverse. I don't think I've ever seen that.
No.
I can't recall. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can look and see, if you can find. But I don't think I've ever seen, a lot of the times everyone just gets stuck in gravel traps. And I think the commentators made a comment I don't know why he backed out onto the track, but it's because of that. You're likely just to get the car stuck. But I can't recall the last time I've ever seen someone get a car out of a barrier, reverse through a gravel trap, get back on the track, and keep going. That was pretty impressive.
Well, it's just kind of super concerning for them because they need to make every race count, given that the bottom 5 teams are so competitive and so close. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just, you got to make every race count. And then, the fact that Albon couldn't even finish the race, and then Logan he did pretty good though. He did pretty good, I think, for his standards. But
yeah, no, I really think he had a solid race for the most part. I think. Yeah, I was watching, I was rooting for him, throughout the race. There was that gaggle of cars, and he was making overtakes and, defending pretty well. And, I was really kind of rooting for him and hoping that he would get that. I didn't think he was going to get into the points. I figured that was really going to be down to Yuki Tsunoda, maybe one of the Haas's or something like that. And then, but yeah, I was really hoping that he would get 12th or 13th or something, which would have been a good result on merit.
Crazy.
So.
It's crazy thing. I mean, hopefully they get their situation, get back to normal, and they have a normal weekend in China, and both of them finish, at least complete the race. But it's just unfortunate. I want to talk about boy Checo, dude. You're a Checo hater.
No,
you're a Checo hater.
No.
Finished second.
Not a hater.
You just kept saying, does he have enough what it takes to back up Max? Well, there you go. Finish second. I know it's just one race, but second.
Well, no, he's finished it. So every race this season has been a 1-2, um,
Yep.
in one way or another, and he's 3 or 4 races finishing second to Max, and that's exactly what you need to do. That's exactly what you need to do to keep the seat. Horner said it's his seat to lose. My
Right.
my concern isn't necessarily that. I think finishing second is great. I just, my biggest concern is when it comes down to it, right? Not when Red Bull's winning dominantly, but when it comes down to like the pressure's on and it's a
uh,
full blown fight, right? Like a battle for first and second, and
right.
like where's Perez going to be? That's my big concern. Not when we're winning by 20 seconds. Like, what's the concern?
He'll be fine, bro. I trust Checo. What's your thoughts on Carlos Sainz, smooth operator, dude? He finished third again,
Yeah,
another podium. He's been doing really
another
good this
podium.
season.
Every race he's finished, he's been on the podium, and no, he's been doing
Did Ferrari
phenomenal.
pick the wrong driver?
To
I'm just
keep,
kidding.
yeah, Charles has been struggling this season, just getting seemingly just struggling to get a big grip on the car. We've seen it in the past
Right,
though, these moments where the car, I think, can kind of characteristically lean towards one driver more than the other. We
right.
saw it in 2022 when that Ferrari, it like midway through the season, there were some changes made, and there was even conspiracies saying like, oh, they're making these changes for Sainz, but there were some changes made to the car that really suited Sainz, and Sainz was getting the best out of the
Hmm.
car. But I'm sure they'll start to dial in the car,
Right.
get it more on its nose like Charles likes, and I'm
Was
sure it'll start leaning back towards him.
Charles really focused on qualifying on the post race show? And he says
Mm-hmm.
he qualified seventh, right? I believe.
Yeah,
Um, but I think he kind of touched on that subject a little bit, that he's having to work a little bit more on the qualifying. When in past years that was his strength, you know what I mean? Qualifying was his strength. He would qualify very, up top with Max, and now he's
yeah,
kind of downfall just a little bit for his standards and whatnot. So it's kind of funny that he touched subject on that, and we actually get to see him struggle a little bit, which we want to see him get back to normal standards for him.
yeah. No, I mean Leclerc is one of the best drivers over the course
Right.
of a lap. I mean, watching his qualifying laps, he just the way he's able to drive cars like at the limit it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's not as smooth and clinical as maybe like a Hamilton or even like a Verstappen. Like Verstappen's still super smooth, and look, it's not that Leclerc's not smooth, but he just drives the car on like the ragged limit, and it's millimeters away from being disaster, and he just slams the car through. And I think it kind of comes back to that theory I've talked to you about, is that, a lot of the times historically, in my opinion, he qualifies better than where the car should be. And that's why he falls back in the races at times. And then,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like I said, Checo is one of the people, and he did a great job this weekend to be so close to Max. But Checo, was like the opposite of Leclerc in the sense that a lot of the times he would qualify poorly and then have to have a strong comeback in the race. And but yeah, so now they both kind of ended on different sides of the spectrum, like the opposite of what they'd normally do, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of fun to see. What's your thoughts on your boy Lewis and Russell and Mercedes? What are your thoughts on the race as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's pretty disappointing for Mercedes. And everyone says, oh, it's a correlation issue. It's a correlation issue, with getting their wind tunnel data translated into real
Hmm.
life. And it just seems like they're kind of, yeah, it just seems that they're kind of lost. Everyone else seems to be, you know, I mean, Red Bull keeps making steps forward, and the other teams around everyone keep making steps forward, and everyone seems to
Hmm.
be getting on top of the rules and regulations. And it seems that while Mercedes isn't, you know, Vettel like made a point when he was being interviewed, and he's like, Mercedes is still a good seat. It's not like they're scrapping for last place, like just because they're on a
Right.
down. they're still where a lot of teams would love to be, right? Like any team, any Haas, Alpines, Saber or Sauber, like any of those teams would kill to be where Mercedes is. But it's just they just seem to be in a spot where they just don't understand what's happening with the car, and yeah, it's disappointing to see. I think Russell got a pretty good result, and
Outmaneuvered Oscar the last lap. No,
yeah, he
to finish
sent
seventh.
it. He absolutely sent it up the inside, and then was able to finagle a little pass around Oscar. And yeah, it's still very funny to me just how calm Oscar always is on the radio. He's just
He's so
like
mellow.
he is always so mellow. He's just a walking Xanax.
Walking ashwagandha. Is that what
Yeah,
stress reliever?
yeah. POV when an F1 driver takes ashwagandha.
Speaking about ashwagandha and Xanax, Yuki, dude.
Oh my
What a
god,
race
the
for him.
opposite.
What a
Yes,
race.
and we talked about the fastest pit stop and what team we predicted that to be, and I think I said McLaren, and I forget who you said. Um, Maybe you said McLaren as well, but
Yeah.
the most who cares about the fastest pit stop? The most important pit stop of the race was
That pass.
that pass. I mean, they were able to get
Yeah.
around two cars with a phenomenal pit stop, and that just shows you the difference
That's
that
key.
like the tenths of a second can make. And the Visa Cash App Red Bull team, yeah,
Props to them.
props to them. They got the points. They earned the points ultimately.
To me, ultimately, I know Charles won driver of the day, but I mean, come on. I think Yuki should have gotten it.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see Charles win driver of the day because he did like he had a good race. But
Yeah.
he had that moment through the second what do they call it? Second, he had that moment through that right hander, I forget what turn, and where he went wide to let Checo
Right.
by, and then that put Lando right at the back of him, and then he was just kind of falling back based off of his strategy, compared to everyone. So I was kind of surprised to see that he got driver of the day. I think he had a good race, but like Yuki, I mean, fought for points, and yeah,
Yeah.
I
Very good
know my
race.
bet was on Yuki going into the weekend, and then my theory was if he gets points, he wins driver of the day. And yeah, I was just very surprised to see Yuki not win, especially in Japan, getting points. And he had a great race.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, he won driver of the day for me.
Yeah, he's driver of the day in our hearts.
What's another takeaway regarding
Yeah,
the Japanese? Well, I mean, aside from Red Bull just being flawless after the Australia
yeah.
disaster.
Actually, I saw some interesting things, and that um, Japan was a pretty good you know reflection point because it's earlier in the season than it was last year, so you're kind of able to see where the teams
Right.
really are at, and it's just impressive to see Red Bull has continued to pull a gap out, and um, like McLaren's really good still in like the fast and high speed corners, and they just have this inherent car characteristic that's not allowing them to be good in the slow stuff.
No, I agree.
Hmm.
I think for me, a
And
couple of
uh
things that are pretty adamant. I do think from right now, Red Bull and Ferrari are the two leading teams, but
hmm
Ferrari's not within catching distance to Red Bull. Like, I don't think it's that close. But I do think
right,
Ferrari's leading Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin. I think as bad as it sounds or as negatively as I don't want to sound, I do think Max is going to cruise to another championship title. It's just
yeah,
going to be one of those. It's just, it is what it is. And
yeah.
I don't know. That's sad to say, but what do you think? I mean, I don't think you have anything opposing that.
No, it's definitely Ferrari's made the biggest step towards Red Bull, um,
Mm-hmm.
and they're definitely the best of the rest right now. And yeah, Red Bull's still in their own, just in their own
league.
world. And the only thing that's going to take down Red Bull is themselves at this point. You know, if if one of those key players, Adrian Newey, Max Verstappen, Horner, Helmut Marko, if one of the only thing that will take down Red Bull is the politics within Red Bull right now. And so and it's pretty surprising to see, because generally it seems like, when teams are winning, everything is working well within the team. Once Nico Rosberg left Mercedes and it was Valtteri and Hamilton, there was such a good dynamic within that team that, I mean, if there wasn't those changes made to the regulations and if Red Bull didn't get as close as they did to be able to fight for the champion, like no one would have stopped Hamilton and Mercedes, and
Right.
because there was nothing coming out poorly about any of those key players. But yeah, the only people who can stop Red Bull right now seem to be Red Bull themselves. Ferrari's in second, and then it seems like McLaren has the third best car overall. And then between Mercedes and Aston Martin, it seems like the Mercedes is the better car, but somehow Alonso keeps pulling out ahead of him.
Well, I think Alonso
and he keeps getting good results.
Alonso's been great since he's been in Aston Martin, but he's been dragging Aston Martin. Stroll is just not. When you look at those teams, obviously Ferrari with Leclerc and Sainz, both very good drivers. Yeah, Mercedes, yes, their team car hasn't been very good, but George and Lewis are obviously capable of having great finishes. Then you got the balance of Lando and Oscar in McLaren.
Both great.
These two
drivers.
Teams have very good both 1A and 1B drivers, and Aston Martin doesn't. I think Stroll is not a very competitive driver. You know what I mean? Like he's just Alonso's just been dragging that team and carrying that team for a while, and it's just him.
Yeah, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it just shows.
Can you imagine? What can you? Because I think Checo's going to keep his seat, so that Red Bull seat's not going to be open. What about Yuki to Aston Martin to replace Stroll? I mean, I don't know.
That's very possible. And I heard somebody just throw a wild theory that, when said out loud, kind of made sense. And it was that if Max, because we talked about, the only people who can stop Red Bull is Red Bull. If Max Verstappen leaves Red Bull, it was Will Buxton. He had the theory that Max Verstappen, he wouldn't go to Mercedes. He can't go to Ferrari. He can't go to McLaren. If he went anywhere outside of Red Bull, it would probably be Aston Martin, and it's to chase that Honda power unit.
Chase the Honda power unit, really?
And because there was the other news that came out that Adrian Newey was offered a astronomical insane deal from Aston Martin, and if those two leave Red Bull for Aston Martin, I mean,
Lawrence Stroll being a big baller, huh? He's got the money.
Mm-hmm.
If I were him, I'd do it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I would love to see that.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine if I would love to see Yuki and Max actually partnered together at
Aston Martin. And what, Alonso goes to Red Bull?
Or even something like that, right? Or even Max and that would be crazy, right? Alonso steps away to go to Red Bull, but man,
that'd be an interesting 2025 season, huh?
Yeah, that'd be very
2025.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
I just don't think that would ever happen, but
I don't think you could see it happening, but it would be interesting, and it would, if that did happen, it just kind of feels to me like if it were to happen and Aston Martin keeps a competitive advantage, gets a hold of Adrian Newey, they have the Honda power unit, and Red Bull, maybe their power unit doesn't go as planned, it would just be another story, though, of Alonso going to the right teams at the wrong time.
And dang, that would suck.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. I would love to see it though. That's
Yeah,
another interesting take that I haven't heard. So that would be
yeah,
very appealing. I think that would do wonders for F1. I mean, I know we all still watch, but the competitiveness is obviously not really much there. I think the 2021 season with Lewis and Max, that's going to be extremely hard and rare to ever beat. You know what I mean? To come
yeah,
to the last race and to finish the way that it ended, like that's going to be very, very hard to beat. But it
yeah.
just hasn't been as competitive with the dominance of Red Bull. And if that were to happen or something similar to that, I think that would be it'd be crazy to see. I'd be so excited.
No, it would be pretty incredible to see, or even if Fernando stayed, right? I mean, you have Fernando and Max in an Adrian Newey Honda powered Aston Martin. Like, that just sounds insane. That sounds. I'd love to see it. I'd love to
So
see it.
next race, Chinese GP, another week off, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
What are your early thoughts on the Chinese Grand Prix in a couple weeks?
Have you seen a Chinese Grand Prix? Like, have you seen that track before?
Just highlights.
Yeah, so it's a pretty, from what I remember, it's a pretty power dependent track. You have that massive back straight and a lot of really fast bits. I think like the slowest corner is the last sector coming off of the back straight, and then the first corner, like that long sweeping corner.
Mm-hmm.
So the Red Bull's still very,
Dominating.
very good in the straights. So I think
Mm-hmm.
like the Ferrari was faster than the Red Bull in the corners, right? Through the high speed stuff. But the Red Bull was getting a lot of its advantage back on the straights when you compared them over a lap. So I think that we will see another good race for Red Bull there. Um, but it'll just be interesting to see. After what Lance Stroll said about the engine in Suzuka,
Mm-hmm.
did you hear that radio message from him?
About like not being in the same level or something like that. They're
Yeah,
just
like
being
not
miles
being in the
away.
same category. I was like, oh my god. I was like,
Yeah.
that is crazy. But that was a funny message, I thought. But I think it will be a good race for Red Bull. I think it'll be a good race for Haas, actually.
Right.
I think, because
Williams too.
Williams has been good on the straights, but like
They just got
Haas
to
is
keep
like
their
the new
car straight.
Williams. Yeah, true.
Right. Right.
Haas has been the new Williams. I mean, they've been so fast on the straights. And then yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think I think with that race being such a power dependent circuit, it'll be interesting. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It'll be my first actually live GP watching it in China. I know it's been away for, has it been 4 years? Since
It's been away for some
2019, right?
time.
Or 4 to 5 years? Since 2019 was
Yeah,
the last one because of COVID
20,
and
I think
everything.
so. Mm-hmm.
So it'll be exciting. Um, like you said, you saying that it's power dominant. Even if I didn't know that information, I would have obviously guessed that Max and Red Bull were going to dominate.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be interesting to see how those like cost, the straight line speed, how they do with Williams and whatnot,
Yeah.
and see how the middle of the pack teams do with Aston Martin, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes
Mm-hmm.
all battling for second and third position. So they have a week off to prepare for it, I think, and I think it'll be good, and I hope it's a good and exciting race. Is there a sprint shootout in this race?
Oh yeah, we haven't seen a sprint race yet,
I think it
and
is. I think it is.
yeah, go ahead and look into that.
Let
But
me
I
check real
think
quick.
if the DRS zones are set up right, and
Yep, sprint
I think
shootout.
that I think that we could have really good racing at China just because the back straight's like wide, it goes into a hairpin. The main
Jeez,
straight
we have to.
goes into kind of an interesting, like really long right into a left, and so
We're
that
gonna have to
usually
take some.
gets messy.
We're gonna have to take a couple Celsius, bro, for this whole weekend.
What time is
Just
everything?
this sprint shootout after practice one is 12:30 a.m.
Mm,
Sprint race 8 p.m. on Friday, so not bad.
okay, no.
Qualifying 12 a.m. on Saturday midnight.
Mm,
Some races Sunday midnight at 12. The last winner Lewis Hamilton.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a good track. I like that track quite a lot. I'm excited to see it. There's some good high speed corners too on the track and some good corners, so maybe it'll be good. But I still think I think Red Bull will still have the advantage. But we'll talk about it more as we come into the weekend.
Yeah, we're excited for more content this week. We're gonna come with fun videos, and then thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in China.